My cane was my lifeline, my independence, guiding me through a world I couldn't see. But then a cop called it a deadly weapon, unleashing a betrayal so profound I could never have imagined. The world, for me, is a symphony of sounds, textures, and smells. I don't see the sunshine. I feel its warmth on my skin. I don't see the cracks in the pavement. I map them with the tip of my cane, Helena. That's what I call her. Helena has been my eyes for the better part of a decade, ever since the accident that stole my sight but sharpened everything else. She's a simple white and red mobility cane, light but sturdy, an extension of my own arm. Together we navigate the city with a rhythm that has become second nature. The tap-tap-tap of Helena on concrete is the drumbeat of my independence. That Tuesday started like any other. The air smelled of rain-washed asphalt and the sweet, yeasty promise of the bakery 2 blocks from my apartment. I was heading there for my morning coffee and a croissant, a simple pleasure that anchored my day. The usual morning chaos was my guide, the rumble of the city bus, the distant siren, the chorus of footsteps hurrying to work. I could distinguish the sharp click of heels from the soft scuff of sneakers, the hurried pace of a commuter from the leisurely stroll of a dog walker. It was all part of the music. I was about halfway to the bakery, tapping my way past the brick wall of the old post office, when a new sound cut through the harmony. It was a harsh, discordant note, a car door slamming shut with unnecessary force, followed by heavy, purposeful footsteps approaching me at speed. My internal alarm, the one honed by years of navigating a world I couldn't see, began to pulse. I stopped, planting Helena firmly on the ground in front of me, and turned my head towards the sound. Freeze. Drop the weapon. Now. The voice was a gravelly bark, laced with an aggression that felt completely out of place on this peaceful morning street. Weapon? My heart hammered against my ribs. I was holding my purse in one hand and Helena in the other. I could hear the jangle of police equipment, the crackle of a radio. A cop. My confusion was quickly being drowned by a cold wave of fear. "Officer, I think there's been a mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and calm. I raised my free hand slowly, a gesture of peace. "I don't have a weapon. This is my cane. I'm blind." I angled my head, showing him the dark glasses that were a permanent fixture on my face. Surely that would be enough. The white cane, the dark glasses, it was the universal uniform of the visually impaired. It was supposed to be a signal for help, for understanding, not for hostility. "Don't play dumb with me," he snarled. He was closer now. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "I saw you, swinging that stick around like some kind of martial arts weapon. You people are always looking for trouble." "You people." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Suddenly, the aggression made a sickening kind of sense. It wasn't just about a misunderstanding. This was something uglier. My skin is the color of rich coffee, a fact that has never mattered to me but has, on occasion, mattered immensely to others. "Sir, this is a mobility cane?" I repeated, enunciating each word carefully, as if speaking to a child. "It's white and red. It helps me walk. Please, just look at it." I could hear other people stopping on the sidewalk. A woman's voice, tentative at first, then firm. "Hey, leave her alone. She's not doing anything. Can't you see she's blind?" "Mind your own business, ma'am," the officer shot back, his attention never leaving me. "I know what I see. Now I'm telling you for the last time. Drop the weapon." My grip tightened on Helena's handle. Letting go of her would be like closing my ears and holding my breath. It would leave me utterly adrift, a ship without a rudder in a hostile sea. She wasn't a weapon. She was my lifeline. To him, she was a threat. To me, the thought of being without her was pure terror. "I can't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I can't let go of my cane." That was all he needed to hear. In the next second, the world exploded. I felt a brutal shove and a hand clamp down on Helena, wrenching her from my grasp with a force that sent a shockwave of pain up my arm. The symphony of the street vanished, replaced by a deafening static of panic. I was untethered, disconnected. I stumbled forward, my hands flying out to catch myself, but there was nothing but empty air. I crashed to my knees on the hard pavement, the rough concrete scraping my skin. The sounds around me became a whirlwind of shouts. The woman screaming, "What are you doing?" and the officer's grunts of exertion. Then, above the chaos, I heard his voice, no longer shouting, but a low, vicious growl right next to my ear as he slammed my shoulder into the ground, and I felt the cold, sharp bite of metal cinching around my wrist. "I told you to drop it," he hissed, his breath hot against my cheek. "Now you're under arrest for assaulting a police officer." The scrape of the metal teeth on the handcuffs was a sound I'll never forget. It was the sound of my world shrinking, of my freedom being locked away. Pain shot through my shoulder where he'd pinned me, and my knees were on fire from the unforgiving pavement. My purse had spilled its contents nearby. I could hear the faint clatter of my keys and a lipstick tube rolling away, but my mind was fixated on the silence where the tap, tap, tap of Helena should be. I felt naked, exposed, a turtle ripped from its shell. "Get up," the Officer Miller, I later learned his name was, growled, hauling me to my feet by my cuffed arms. The movement was jarring, yanking my shoulders at an unnatural angle. I cried out, a mix of pain and frustrated rage. "You're hurting me. I haven't done anything." The woman who had tried to intervene was still there. Her voice was shaking now, but filled with outrage. "I'm filming this. I've got it all on video. You can't just do this." "Get back or you're next," Miller yelled over his shoulder, his focus entirely on manhandling me towards his patrol car. He didn't seem to care that he was being recorded. He probably thought it justified his actions. He shoved me forward, and without Helena my balance was gone. I stumbled, my feet tangling. He just grunted in annoyance and pushed me harder. I felt the hot metal of the car against my cheek before he forced my head down and bundled me into the back seat. It was a clumsy, humiliating ordeal. The door slammed shut, and the sounds of the street, of the woman still shouting about her rights and my innocence, were instantly muffled. I was alone in the dark, suffocating silence of the car with him. The ride to the station was short, but it felt like an eternity. The plastic of the seat was slick and cold against my skin. The smell of cheap air freshener failed to mask the underlying scent of sweat and fear. Miller said nothing to me. He just breathed heavily through his nose and tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, a restless, angry rhythm. I tried to center myself, to push past the panic. "Officer," I said, my voice surprisingly level, "I want your name and your badge number." A short, derisive laugh was his only answer. "I have a right to your name and badge number," I insisted. He finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescending poison. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." At the station I was pulled from the car and led through a labyrinth of echoing hallways. The air was thick with the smells of antiseptic, burnt coffee, and old paper. I was a spectacle. I could hear the whispers, the pauses in conversation as I was paraded past desks. "What's this one for?" a voice asked. Miller's reply was loud and proud. "Assault on an LEO, resisting arrest, came at me with a metal pipe." A metal pipe. He had transformed Helena, my guide, my connection to the world, into a vulgar weapon in his twisted narrative. The lie was so audacious, so complete, that for a moment I felt a dizzying sense of unreality, as if I had fallen into someone else's nightmare. They took my fingerprints, a bizarre and invasive process. A woman with cold hands guided my fingers, pressing them one by one onto the inky pad and then the paper. They tried to take a mugshot, forcing me to remove my dark glasses. The flash was a sudden, violent burst of heat against my closed eyelids. I felt utterly violated, my disability put on display as part of my manufactured criminality. They took my purse, my phone, everything. Finally, they shoved me into a cold concrete cell. The metal door clanged shut, the sound of the bolt sliding home a final, definitive seal on my new reality. Hours passed. I sat on the hard bench, replaying the morning in my head, trying to make sense of the senseless. Eventually, a guard came and told me I had a right to a phone call. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely punch in the numbers. I called my best friend, Sarah. "Sarah?" I choked out. the tears I'd been holding back finally breaking free. "Anna! Oh my God, where are you? I saw a video online. A woman who looked just like you. A cop." "It was me, Sarah. It was me," I sobbed. "They arrested me. They said I assaulted him." I gave her what little information I had, and she promised she'd get a lawyer and be there as soon as she could. Hanging up, a small piece of the crushing weight on my chest lifted. I wasn't entirely alone. It must have been another hour, maybe 2, before the cell door opened again. It wasn't Sarah. It was a different officer, older, with a voice that was calm and authoritative. He had a file in his hand. "Anna Evans," he said, his tone professional, almost gentle. "I'm Sergeant Davies. I've come to review your case." A wave of relief washed over me. This was it. This was the moment a rational person would step in, look at the facts. A blind woman, a white cane, a cop with a temper, and this whole nightmare would end. "Thank you, Sergeant," I said, my voice trembling with hope. "Officer Miller? He made a mistake. He took my mobility cane. He thought it was a weapon." The sergeant was silent for a long moment. I heard him flip a page in the file. "Well, Miss Evans," he said, his voice losing its gentle edge and taking on a cold, metallic hardness. "That's not what the report says, and it's not what his body cam footage shows." My blood ran cold. "What? What does it show?" "It shows you refusing multiple direct orders to drop a weapon," he stated flatly. "It shows you making an aggressive movement towards the officer. But here's the part you might find most interesting. We had your cane examined in forensics. It seems the standard tip has been replaced with a solid steel point, sharpened to a fine edge. It's a classified deadly weapon. So now we're not just talking about assault. We're talking about assault with a deadly weapon, with intent to do serious bodily harm. You lied to us, Miss Evans, and you're in a whole world of trouble." The air in the cell seemed to solidify, pressing in on me from all sides. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The sergeant's words echoed in the small space, each one a hammer blow against the fragile structure of my hope. A sharpened steel point? A deadly weapon? It was impossible. It was a lie spun from the same malicious thread as you people. "No," I stammered, shaking my head violently, as if to dislodge the absurdity. "That's not true. Helena, my cane, it's a standard-issue graphite cane. The tip is nylon. It has to be soft so it doesn't catch in cracks." "Ah," I was babbling, the technical details spilling out in a desperate attempt to anchor myself in reality. "I've had it for years. I would know. I would feel it." Sergeant Davies let out a sigh, a theatrical sound of weary patience. "Look, Miss Evans, the evidence is the evidence. Your story isn't holding up. The district attorney is looking at adding a charge for premeditated assault, given the modification to the weapon." My mind reeled. Premeditated? They were building a narrative, a monstrous fiction where I, a blind woman on her way to get a croissant, was a calculating would-be cop killer. The sheer insanity of it was breathtaking. This wasn't just a mistake or an overzealous officer anymore. This was a conspiracy. They were closing ranks, protecting their own by burying me under a mountain of lies. "This is a frame-up," I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "Officer Miller is lying to cover his own brutality, and you're helping him." "Watch your tone," Davies warned, his voice turning to ice. "Right now, the best thing you can do is cooperate. A lawyer is on her way for you. I suggest you listen to whatever they tell you." He turned to leave, the sound of his polished shoes sharp against the concrete. The door clanged shut again, leaving me in the suffocating silence, my thoughts a screaming vortex of fear and fury. Sarah arrived with Ben Carter, a lawyer whose reputation preceded him. Ben was known for taking on civil rights cases, a pit bull in a tailored suit. His voice was calm and reassuring, but I could feel the coiled energy behind it. He listened intently as I recounted every detail, from the smell of the bakery to the cold steel of the handcuffs to the sergeant's outrageous claims. He didn't interrupt, just let me pour it all out. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "They're playing dirty, Anna," he finally said. "This sharpened tip is their cornerstone." They know the initial arrest was bogus, especially with a civilian witness video. So they've escalated. They've manufactured physical evidence to retroactively justify the assault. It's a classic, disgusting move. But how can they do that? I cried, my voice raw. My cane is in their possession. They've obviously tampered with it. And it's our word against the forensics department of the city's police force, Ben said grimly. It's a high wall to climb, but it's not impossible. That witness video Sarah told me about is our starting point. Sarah, has it been posted? Everywhere, Sarah confirmed, her voice tight with anger. It's got thousands of views already. People are furious. Good, Ben said. Public pressure is a weapon. Now, Anna, they're going to try and offer you a plea deal. Something light, maybe plead guilty to resisting arrest, and they'll drop the assault charges. They'll say it's your best option. Do not, under any circumstances, take it. Admitting guilt to anything validates their entire story. He was right. The next day, a slick prosecutor came to my cell. He offered me a deal. Plead guilty to a misdemeanor resisting arrest, and all the felony charges, the ones that could send me to prison for years, would disappear. It's a gift, Miss Evans, he said with a condescending smile I could hear in his voice. You walk out of here with time served and a little probation. Much better than risking a decade in prison, don't you think? It was tempting. The thought of walking out, of feeling the sun on my skin and breathing fresh air, was a powerful lure. But then I pictured Miller's snarling face, heard the words, "You people," and felt the cold finality of the sergeant's lies. They weren't just trying to put me in jail, they were trying to annihilate my truth, to rewrite my identity from an independent woman into a violent criminal. No, I said, my voice clear and firm. I'm not guilty of anything. I will not be pleading guilty. We'll see you in court. The battle lines were drawn. Ben was a whirlwind of motion, filing discovery requests, giving press conferences, and tracking down the woman who filmed the video, a student named Maria. The video was our lifeline. It didn't show the sharpened tip, of course, but it clearly showed my non-aggressive posture, Miller's unprovoked rage, and the terrified confusion on my face. It showed him yanking Helena away from me, not me lunging at him with it. The city's strategy was to discredit me. They leaked my name to the press, along with the official police report. Suddenly, headlines screamed about a blind fury who attacked a heroic officer with a customized spear cane. They dug into my past looking for anything they could use. They found a self-defense class I'd taken 5 years ago, a class for visually impaired women, and tried to paint me as some kind of trained assassin. The day of my bail hearing was a media circus. Ben argued fiercely that I was no flight risk and no danger to the community. The prosecutor stood up, held up a clear plastic evidence bag, and presented the judge with the weapon. Your Honor, he said, his voice ringing with dramatic flair, this is not a cane. This is a shiv, modified with the express purpose of causing harm. The defendant is a danger. The judge set bail at an astronomical amount, far beyond anything I could afford. My heart sank. I was going to be trapped in here, in this concrete box, until the trial. But then something amazing happened. The story, fueled by Maria's video, had gone viral. A crowdfunding campaign had been started for my legal defense and bail. Donations poured in from all over the country, from people who saw the video and recognized the injustice for what it was. Within 48 hours, we had the money. Walking out of that jail was the most surreal experience of my life. The air had never smelled so sweet. The sounds of the city had never seemed so vibrant. But the fight was far from over. We prepared for trial. Ben's strategy was twofold: dismantle the police narrative, piece by piece, and put Officer Miller's own history on trial. His investigation had uncovered a pattern. Miller had a history of complaints for excessive force, particularly against minority citizens. 3 of them had been settled out of court by the city. He was a lawsuit waiting to happen, and I was his latest victim. Our key piece of evidence, besides the video, was going to be my cane itself. Ben hired a renowned metallurgist and expert in mobility equipment to examine it. We had to prove it had been tampered with after it was taken into evidence. The day our expert, Dr. Albright, was finally allowed to examine Helena under court supervision was tense. I sat in Ben's office, twisting my hands, while he and the expert were at the forensics lab. Hours later, Ben called me. His voice was strange, a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Anna," he said, "you're not going to believe this. Albright found something. They were clumsy. The tip they attached to your cane. It's a specific alloy, military grade." "Okay," I said, not understanding the significance. "And?" "And," Ben continued, his voice dropping an octave. "He ran a trace analysis on the metal. It's not just any military-grade alloy. The specific elemental signature matches only one thing in the police department's inventory: the tips of the breaching rounds from the SWAT team's shotguns." I gasped. "So they took a piece of their own equipment and stuck it on my cane?" "Exactly," Ben said, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "They framed you with a piece of their own hardware. We've got them. But that's not even the craziest part. While examining the handle, Dr. Albright found a hidden compartment. It was empty, but he said it looked like it was designed to hold a small electronic device. Did you know anything about that?" A cold dread, completely different from the fear I'd felt before, washed over me. A hidden compartment? It sounded like something out of a spy movie. "No," I whispered. "Helena was a gift, from my ex-boyfriend, Mark. He gave it to me about a year ago. He said it was a special, high-tech model." My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Why would Mark give me a cane with a secret compartment? We'd had a terrible breakup. He was a tech bro with a vindictive streak, and some shady connections I never fully understood. Suddenly, a horrible suspicion began to dawn, a possibility so terrifying it made the police frame-up seem almost trivial. What if the police hadn't put anything on my cane? What if they had just found what was already there? The revelation about the hidden compartment sent a shockwave through our case. Mark. It always came back to Mark. Our breakup had been a slow-motion car crash. He was charismatic and brilliant, but also controlling and possessive. When I finally ended it, he didn't take it well. He'd made veiled threats, paranoid accusations, and then just disappeared. The cane had been his last gift, presented as a peace offering. A special, high-tech model, with a GPS tracker, he'd claimed, just to keep you safe. I'd been uncomfortable with it, but desperate to appease him and end the drama, I'd accepted it. Now that gift felt like a bomb that had been silently ticking in my hand for a year. "Ben," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "what if the sharpened tip was already there? What if Mark put it there?" There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "To frame you? Or someone else?" I breathed. The pieces of a puzzle I never knew existed clicking into place with horrifying speed. He was into some shady stuff, Ben. Cryptocurrency, dark web. He was always paranoid, talking about needing protection. What if this cane wasn't for me at all? What if he was using me, my blindness, as the perfect cover to carry? Something. Ben's legal mind immediately grasped the implications. A dead drop. A mule who would never be suspected. And if something went wrong, you'd be the one holding the weapon. The theory was monstrous, but it fit Mark's calculated cruelty perfectly. It also explained everything. Officer Miller, with his racist assumptions and hair-trigger temper, hadn't just stumbled upon a random blind woman. He'd stumbled upon a blind woman carrying a cane that was, in fact, a cleverly disguised weapon. His prejudice had led him to the right conclusion for all the wrong reasons. The police hadn't framed me with their own equipment. They had simply found the frame Mark had already built. The SWAT tip was a coincidence, a one-in-a-million match that they had mistakenly assumed was their own. Their crime wasn't planting evidence, but their violent assault, their lies, and their malicious prosecution, based on bigotry rather than fact. This changed our entire strategy. We weren't just fighting the police anymore. We were untangling a conspiracy created by my ex-boyfriend. Ben hired a private investigator who started digging into Mark's life. What he found was a cesspool. Mark wasn't just a tech bro. He was a key player in an online illegal arms marketplace. He'd been using untraceable 3D printed components and modified everyday objects to move them. My cane, it turned out, was a prototype for a discreet stabbing weapon. The hidden compartment was for a data chip. Our trial became a three-ring circus. The prosecution, confident in their physical evidence, presented Officer Miller as a hero who had narrowly avoided a vicious attack. He took the stand, puffed up with self-righteousness, and recounted his fabricated story of my aggression. Then it was Ben's turn. He didn't start by attacking Miller's story. He started by asking about the cane. "Officer Miller, you identified this as a weapon immediately, correct?" "Yes, sir. My training kicked in." "I saw the threat," Miller said proudly. "And what was the threat? Describe what you saw that made you believe Ms. Evans was about to attack you." Miller described me swinging the metal pipe in a threatening manner, a description that Maria's video, which Ben then played for the jury, completely contradicted. The video showed me standing still, my cane planted firmly on the ground. The first crack appeared in his testimony. Then Ben brought up Miller's service record. One by one, he detailed the prior excessive force complaints. The city's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge, seeing the pattern, allowed it. The hero cop began to look like a bully with a badge. The climax, however, was when we put the cane itself on trial. Dr. Albright, our expert, took the stand and explained his findings. He confirmed the tip was a weapon, but then he dropped the bombshell. He detailed how the alloy, while similar to the SWAT rounds, had microscopic manufacturing differences. It wasn't police issue. He then revealed the hidden compartment and explained its likely purpose. The final witness was the private investigator. He laid out Mark's entire operation, connecting him to multiple ongoing federal investigations. He presented emails and chat logs where Mark bragged about his new delivery system, and a chilling message to an associate after our breakup. The asset is burned, but the prototype is still in play. A perfect parting gift. The courtroom was silent. The prosecution's case had been dismantled, replaced by a narrative so bizarre and sinister it was undeniable. They had built their entire case on a lie they hadn't even invented themselves. They had simply picked up Mark's loaded gun and fired it. The jury was out for less than 2 hours, not guilty on all counts. The sob that escaped me was one of pure, unadulterated relief. I was free, but I wasn't finished. The day after my acquittal, we filed the lawsuit. $5 million against Officer Miller and the city for assault, battery, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, and violating my civil rights. The city, facing a PR nightmare and an ironclad case, didn't even try to fight it. Miller was fired. The city settled for the full amount. They never caught Mark. He had vanished, a ghost in the machine. A part of me will always be looking over my shoulder, but I refuse to live in fear. I used a portion of the settlement to start a foundation dedicated to providing legal aid for victims of police misconduct and promoting better training for officers on interacting with people with disabilities. My new cane is named Phoenix. She's simple, lightweight graphite with a standard nylon tip. There are no secret compartments, no hidden blades. She's just a cane. When her tip taps against the pavement, it is not a drumbeat of independence anymore. It is a song of resilience. It's the sound of a woman who was dragged into the dark, lost her way, and found her own light. It's the sound of me walking forward, seeing the world more clearly than ever before.